Viewers, in a world where faith in multilateralism is faltering, India's presidency of the G20 stood out for its ability to infuse a sense of fresh confidence in the efficacy of multilateral organizations to provide solutions for the greater global good. I'm not saying this, viewers. This is being claimed by no less an authority than India's G20 Sherpa in a new book called How India Scaled Mount G20. This is an insider's account, fundamentally, of the entire event that really won India a lot of plaudits around the world. But how did India manage to pull it off? This is what we're going to dive into with Amitabh Kant now. And viewers, thank you for watching, and Mr. Kant, thank you for speaking to me. This is an important discussion we are having, viewers. Also, let me just put the context out there, because the global backdrop to India taking over the G20 presidency was very complicated, much like it is today. And public faith in multilateral groupings to address these challenges was very low. The G20 was also facing a credibility crisis in the public eye, wasn't it, Mr. Kant, when we decided to helm the presidency of this grouping?
So Rahul, the challenge was that the United Nations had failed. The Security Council could not move forward. They could not arrive at a consensus. The challenge was that it was the post-COVID era. Vast segments of population across the world had fallen below poverty line. People had lost their jobs. There was a climate crisis on. The SDGs had been badly hit. Only 12 of the 170 SDGs were on track. There was a Russia-Ukraine crisis happening on the other side. So there were, challenges galore. And in the midst of this, the Prime Minister, who was then the leader of G20, wanted us to do a presidency which would be ambitious, which would be action-oriented, which would be very forward-looking and decisive. That was the challenge. And the relations, the multilateral relations between different countries were really complex and very difficult, and we had a huge amount of challenges at that point of time.
Now you mentioned, and I quote you, that strong political drive from leaders characterizes the most successful presidencies, complemented by relevant content that inspires action, unquote. Now, who in India provided that drive?
So, the Prime Minister was the leader. He was the leader of G20. I was only his Sherpa. We could arrive at a consensus because he was very clear about the vision. He was bold and risky. My job was to take him on top of the Mount Everest. And Mount Everest can only be achieved if the leader himself has a clear vision. He was absolutely clear that we want a consensus. He told me at one stage that if we are not able to achieve consensus, if all the leaders across the world are not able to achieve consensus on very complex issues which are impacting the citizens of the world, we would rather not be a member of G20. We would work with BRICS, we would work with IPSA, but please tell them that it is their responsibility as well to arrive at a consensus. The challenge was that we were dealing with emerging markets, the global south. We were dealing with G7. We were dealing with Russia, China, and we were dealing also with Saudi Arabia and Turkey. To bring them around to every single issue to a consensus at that point of time, and yet be ambitious, was the challenge. And we could achieve it simply because the Prime Minister remained calm when the storm was brewing. He gave a lot of delegated authority to me to negotiate with boldness and courage. And also, he fully supported us all through the negotiations and said that you have to achieve ensure that India comes out a winner with consensus on many of these issues.
Yeah, that Delhi declaration was really important. Now, I'm going to dive into that because
So
there is so
Delhi,
much. No, hang on, because there is so much to talk about. But I just want to, before I get there, just ask you one single question. What were the Prime Minister's hopes? You say that, arrive at a consensus. So what were his hopes from the G20? What was the broad theme he had envisioned for it?
Rahul, multilateralism works only when there is a full consensus. If one country opposes it, then there is no consensus and the document falls apart. Now, the Prime Minister wanted us to achieve G20 is essentially an organization which drives global growth. So he said there should be balanced, inclusive, sustainable growth. He said that we should accelerate, secondly, we should accelerate the pace of implementation of sustainable development goals which had been accepted by all countries in the United Nations. Thirdly, he said that there should be reform of the multilateral institutional system, which was a top priority for us. Fourthly, he said that there should be technological transformation, there should be acceptance of the digital public infrastructure through which India had achieved so much in the last few years. So use technology to leapfrog. Now, we had many challenges on that because there was the big tech in USA, there was Tencent and Alibaba in China, but we were able to do that. And then the Prime Minister wanted us to achieve the Green Development Pact. And Green Development Pact was ambition both from the viewpoint of G7 to move towards action for climate towards 1.5 degree, but there was ambition from the global south to achieve more financial allocations and financial resources. So both ambitions had to be converged. And lastly, the Prime Minister wanted us to push women-led development, which was bringing countries like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, China all together to move from the United Nations concept of women empowerment to women-led development.
Now, you've described geopolitics as the elephant in the room. I mean, that's the title of one of your chapters. It was left to your team to negotiate one of the most hotly contested multilateral documents, the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, or the NDLD as you describe it, in India's diplomatic history. And you've used that, and you've used it with deliberation, saying that this is perhaps the most significant balancing act ever performed by diplomats in India. Now, walk us through the trial and tribulations and the breakthrough. We'll go to the breakthrough because it comes in steps, but the trial and tribulations, there was a very difficult chapter there that you traversed.
So Rahul, first and foremost, we didn't host the meeting in Delhi. We took all the Sherpas away, 70 kilometers away from Delhi into new district of Haryana, Grand Bharat of ITC, where we hosted the meeting. We didn't allow any international or national media to step in. When negotiations were held in a closed room, we didn't allow any Sherpa to bring in his mobile, because any leakage would have led to the entire document getting leaked and the entire movement getting wrecked. So we said no mobiles are allowed, nobody can take a photograph, nothing. We started negotiating on a clean slate. We went through close to about 300 hours of negotiation on one para. We held 250 bilaterals. 16 drafts failed. Is the 17th draft at about 12:30 in the night after the leaders had started arriving. By that time, I knew everybody's red line. Each one of them, we'd held a bilateral several times over. I gave them the final draft. And I said, this is it. This is the final draft. You either take it or leave it. I will not negotiate anymore.
No, getting ahead of yourself. Hold on. Stay. One second. I'm going to get to that. Take it or leave it. That's an important statement that you made. And I know what the Prime Minister told you, so you'll have to tell it to us. But hang on. We're getting way too far ahead of ourselves. You already got to the last moments. There were a lot of hiccups in between, and I want to focus on some of them. So, first of all, everything was handled through a single laptop. I mean, that sounds, it's unheard of.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a huge risk. What if something had happened to that laptop?
Yeah.
So tell us, why did you just single out this one laptop? What is the thinking?
Because there were previous G20 meetings, we had seen that there were too many leakages which had wrecked G20s. I'd seen this in Bali. It was a divided house. We had failed throughout the year. All our ministerials had failed. This was the last bit where we had to ensure that we achieved success. There was, the Prime Minister had just said that you have to do it. So we had, we wanted to ensure that nothing is leaked out at all. And we were working through one laptop. That's it. And no mobiles allowed at all.
And tell me, Mr. Kant, this is very interesting. Tell me, because there was a time when over one paragraph, people tore their hair out for 7-8 hours. I mean, that was the minutiae.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a large number of examples of wordplay. Every word sort of was put through a thresher. Give me some of those illustrated examples from your book. Some of those words that were contentious.
Every word, every letter was fought for. And that is why we had to go through many, many rounds. When you have 20 Sherpas with 20 screens in front, you can make a change, you can give your version only if it is accepted by others, and then we make the change right on the screen. Territorial sovereignty, political sovereignty, all that, every word was fought for. Every bit, this is not an era of war, or the use of nuclear weapon is inadmissible. All of these words were fought for, and therefore that one para for the planet.
Who fought them, Mr. Kant? Who was raising the red flags?
Every single country, G7 within itself, it had different viewpoints. You had a perspective from Turkey, China, Russia, emerging markets had a view. Our job was to bring everybody together and yet retain ambition in the para. Huge ambition. And if you read the wording of that para, because every single multilateral forum had failed, the United Nations had failed, we had failed throughout the year. It was important that that para became the para, and once it was accepted, that para has been used till now by every single multilateral organization.
And the Prime Minister was checking in with you, or asked you to check in with him every so often. I mean, it was almost like a cricket match going on. You were sort of reporting ball by ball to him. Was that intimidating, or was that level of scrutiny inspiring? Tell me a little bit about that. Was he ever menacing? Was he saying, "Kya kar rahe ho, bhai? Why can't you seal the deal?"
Rahul, that one para, when I say it took us 300 hours of negotiation, and 16 drafts had failed, and I was sending a situation report to my leader, that's the Prime Minister, every 2 hours. Now, that meant that because I had to send him a report, I was focusing on outcomes. Very important that you keep focusing all the time on outcomes and results, and that was very important. But I want to take you on to what happened even when I said that this is the last and final draft. After that, the Russian Sherpa walked into my room.
Yeah.
Now, this was already about 1 o'clock in the night. This was 1 o'clock in the night. Leaders had already come in. Everybody wanted to go and brief their leader. And I said, take it or leave it. The Russian Sherpa and his deputy minister, her deputy minister, who'd flown in from Moscow, walked in. And he said that this is not acceptable to us because they wanted a line against the sanctions imposed. Now, I knew that was a red line for G7. G7 will never accept it. So I said, it's not possible. They kept on arguing, and the argument went on for about 40 minutes. And then finally we had to tell them that if you don't agree, we'll have no other option but to invite Zelensky to give the address after our Prime Minister had spoken. Now, Zelensky had already spoken in Indonesia. He hijacked the whole meeting. He spoke for about 35 minutes there. Now, G7 wanted him to speak in Delhi as well. The Prime Minister was very clear that this is a meeting of G20. We will not allow anybody else to come in. And therefore, when we told this to the Russians, the Russians just said, give us 15 minutes time. And they came back and they said that the para is accepted by us. So the Russia accepted it. Now, I had given about a time of 4 a.m. in the morning, and by 3:30, 4 o'clock, I got the consent of most of the G7 countries. Emerging markets were already with us. In the morning, Prime Minister came to Bharat Mandapam at about 8 a.m. to inspect it, and he asked me, what's the status? Have you achieved consensus? So I told him there's still some more work to be done between USA, China. etc. And he told me that, and when I started telling him the complexity, he told me, don't tell me process, don't give me procedures, just get me consensus.
No, and he told you, if they have such a problem, put their leaders onto me. I'll speak to the leaders. I don't want official level people to sort of muck it up. Just pick up the phone. I'll speak to Biden or Xi or whatever it was, and we'll sort it out.
So
tell me a little bit about that.
The Prime Minister was very, very clear. So, the Prime Minister was very clear. He didn't want procedures. He didn't want processes. He wanted consensus. So, after he left, I phoned up the American Sherpa because I had got consent from all the other G7 countries. And the American Sherpa told me that he will, he's still to discuss with President Biden, but he'll get back to me in 15 minutes. And he got back to me saying that President Biden is okay with the draft, but they have a challenge with two things. One is they want to change in one word, just one word. And, he said, please change that word. And second, he said that I want consent of Russia and China before we give our consent.
Wow.
Now, we got the consent of Russia before night, the previous night. After I finished talking with him, I called up the Chinese Sherpa. And the Chinese Sherpa said that it's all okay with us, but we want one line to which we had earlier agreed to be changed. I said, but if you've agreed, we can't change it. He said, no. Our Prime Minister says that the United States cannot hold the G20 in 2026. So I said, why? So he said, because the Americans don't issue us visas. They don't issue visas to people from Hong Kong, to our governor from Hong Kong. So we don't want this meeting to be held in US. Now for US that was important because President Biden was to fight the elections. And so I got back to the US, and the US said, nothing doing. We will never allow this to be changed. So the leaders' meeting started at 9 o'clock. From 9:15 till about 12:30, I negotiated on a bilateral issue between China and USA. The Chinese said that we'll finally take a written letter, legal guarantee from United States saying that they will issue visa. The United States said that we can't give a legal written guarantee. Finally, I had to tell them that I'm a native English speaker. A mere letter saying that we will ensure that visa will be given by the United States should be okay. And then the American Sherpa got them a letter saying that we will ensure that visas are issued. We clinched that at about 12:45. We went to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister checked out again and again with us whether everybody was on board. We said yes, now we've got everybody on board. And at about 1:30, he announced on the first day itself, that was the first day he announced that we've got a consensus on all the 83 paras. We've got a consensus on 7,000 words. Everyone has agreed to every single word and every single letter. And that's how the most ambitious document in the history of G20, which had 112 outcomes, was clinched.
And in the middle of all of this, of course, was the great moon landing. So apparently in that room where tensions were really running high, everyone put their pens down because you said, hang on guys, let's look at the screen. There's something dramatic happening. So everyone looks at the screen. And I'm told, because you've written this in your book, that actually brought the room together. There was a certain sense of us.
There was huge tension when we were discussing climate negotiations, which was the other very tough part of it. And, our moon, we were landing on the moon. So I said, hang on, we've got something interesting to show you, and we put on the moon landing for them. And you won't believe it, all of them stood up and clapped for India. Each one of those countries clapped for ISRO, for the people, for what we had achieved by our landing on the moon. And it was a special moment, and I think India's stature enormously went up with that.
Oh, you're giving me goose flesh. I'm so emotional right now. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, well, it was a fantastic day. And to imagine that all those people in that room sort of, you were India's ambassador, so to speak, in that room on that day. And what a moment it must have been. How proud you must have felt. Anyhow, let me just quickly rewind a little bit, because the Prime Minister told you, and he gave you this phrase, take it or leave it. There was a point where I think even the Prime Minister and pretty much everyone in the media, certainly all of us, thought that there was never going to be an agreement. This was going to be another Bali 2.0. And before that, there had been other, of course, G20 summits that had ended up with no consensus. So we thought history was repeating itself. Now, what did he tell you exactly?
So the PM told me that consensus at all cost. And he said, he'd been very ambitious about G20. He made it into a people's movement. At the beginning of the year, he told us that, G20 should not be like what other countries do in one or two destinations. Take it to every state of India, every union territory of India. So we took it to Andaman, we took it to Lakshadweep, we took it to every state of India. We turned it into a people's movement. Every school, every college, diplomacy was taken to the grassroots level. It became a people's movement. It became a Jan Andolan. So he had a lot at stake on this, and he made it very clear that it can't be just a normal diplomatic event. It has to achieve very high level of ambitions, a very high level of action, and also it needs to have 100% consensus. And that is what we drove at. Because he was behind us, he was willing to be bold, he was willing to be risky, he went for the stars, and we fully achieved it, because we had his full backing all through. And that was really important. He backed us to the hilt on this.
Well, you must have iron nerves. I mean, it's quite clear, because it does matter to a world leader that he can bring all the countries together. And as you mentioned in your book, he said, why are we even hosting this if, I could do BRICS, I could do other stuff. I mean, I don't need to do this if we are not going to be able to bring everyone together.
Yeah, so once a leader says that, it gives you a lot of strength as a Sherpa to be able to tell other Sherpas that we are willing to walk out of G20, we are willing to go and work with BRIC, we are willing to work with India, Brazil, South Africa, and Russia. We are willing to take a stand, and if you are willing to take that stand because your leader has already told you to do that, it requires a lot of courage, it requires a lot of guts, it requires a lot of determination. So, while in this world of diplomacy, while we were cajoling, while we were pleading, we were also being very tough, and we were being very intimidating at times, and that really showed the new face of India, the new stature of India. And if Prime Minister's stature was so high, and only because of that stature and standing of his, we could achieve much of this ambition.
Yeah, you leveraged it, and people
because he traveled across, he'd met all the leaders.
He has.
He had a personal equation with all the leaders.
I want to, you were talking about all these great leaders, and all of them have a degree of self-importance and all of that. We know that. So I want to ask you something, because people didn't really focus on this. It's a story that you've told. One major logistical hurdle was how to accommodate more than 100 aircraft carrying VVIPs. That challenge, you go into a lot of details. I was mind blown at how this came together. Give us a few details of that.
Well, there were huge challenges because, not only in terms of security and safety, in terms of ensuring that Delhi kind of slows down a lot during that period of the Leaders' Summit, and the Prime Minister himself requested the citizens of Delhi to move out of Delhi for a while so that we could have this thing. But to get over 130 planes coming into Delhi and moving them to places like Jaipur, outside all the airports in close proximity of Delhi, and to ensure that they are back in time to pick up their leaders. And it was a
because there's only that much room at the IGI to land aircrafts and park them. There were only those many slots. There were also a bunch of aircraft that couldn't fly because there were redundancies, etc., etc. So there was a big complication.
Yeah, huge complication, and therefore what this demonstrated, Rahul, was also the fact that there was an earlier international event which was the Commonwealth Games. So we had to demonstrate, it was a challenge also for us, that India could excel in logistics, India could excel in organizing, not merely one event but 230 events around the year. We could do things to perfection, we could work in partnership with the states. We demonstrated that this was a great example of cooperative federalism, where states could showcase their tourism products, they could showcase their local art forms, they could bring out their local cuisine and bring out the soft power of each state of India.
It was...
And, also show their one district, one product.
Absolutely. And I, as we enter the final couple of minutes of this conversation, I want to ask you, because a lot of them were staying in different hotels and some of their choices seemed very strange to us. I mean, you had the whole French delegation staying at quite a small hotel, actually, very, very, very nice boutique hotel, but small one. Were they was this assigned to them, or did they make these preferential calls? I mean, how did that work? Because I'm sure they all wanted the big suite, the presidential suite at the Moria. I'm sure each one of them must have put in a bid for that.
No, it was very well coordinated.
Right.
And actually, the chief of protocol played a key role in that by ensuring that everybody, choices were given, and many, it worked out very well, because it was a constant process of discussion with everyone, and everybody got what they wanted. And you'd be surprised actually that many countries don't want VIP suites, etc. Some of them require very top-class hotels, but others want just good, comfortable rooms as well. So this was a great experience in logistics for India as well. And I think it's really put India in very good preparation for hosting very large events. So India is very well prepared to host the Olympics now.
That's the spin-off really, and not just the Olympics viewers, but perhaps other summits such as these, and that really is a learning too. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kant. This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you very much for sharing these insights and writing this book.
Thanks, Rahul, and thanks for reading the book.
Well, pleasure. It was a real pleasure. As I said, goose flesh even now. Thank you very much. Thank you.